The golden hues of the setting sun cast long shadows across the path as I ambled along, relishing the rare freedom of a day off from the usual hustle and bustle of life. The air was crisp with the promise of autumn, a welcome respite from the stifling heat of the summer days. As I walked, the gentle rustle of leaves and the distant chirping of crickets provided a soothing soundtrack to my solitary stroll. Lost in my thoughts, I rounded a bend in the path, my mind wandering to mundane matters of daily life. But then, as if from nowhere, it appeared, a figure lurking behind a bush, its form obscured by the fading light of the day. My heart lurched in my chest as I came to an abrupt halt, my eyes widening in disbelief. There, emerging from the shadows, was a clown. Its garish makeup seemed to glow in the dimming light, the exaggerated grin painted upon its face sending a shiver down my spine. For a moment, we stood locked in a silent, unspoken exchange, the weight of its gaze bearing down upon me like an invisible force. I swallowed hard, my mouth suddenly dry as fear clawed at my insides. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to flee from this eerie encounter, but my feet remained rooted to the spot, paralyzed by the sheer absurdity of the situation. And then, just as swiftly as it had appeared, the clown vanished back into the shadows, leaving me standing alone on the deserted path, my heart pounding in my chest and my mind reeling with unanswered questions. As I continued on my way home, the memory of that unsettling encounter lingered like a dark cloud overhead, casting a pall of unease over the once familiar surroundings. Little did I know that this would be only the beginning of a series of chilling events that would shake me to my core. The encounter with the clown had left me shaken, but I tried to shake off the unease as I made my way back home. The comforting familiarity of my neighborhood should have eased my nerves, but every shadow seemed to hold a sinister secret, and every rustle of leaves sent a shiver down my spine. When I finally reached the safety of my house, I breathed a sigh of relief, eager to put the encounter behind me. But as I stepped through the threshold, the memory of the clown's painted face lingered in the back of my mind like a specter refusing to be banished. "Mom, I'm home," I called out, my voice trembling slightly despite my best efforts to sound calm. But as I recounted the strange encounter on the path, her brow furrowed in concern. "Are you sure it wasn't just a prank, Roger?" she asked, her tone laced with skepticism. "You know how kids can be, especially around this time of year." But I knew what I had seen, and it wasn't the product of some elaborate hoax. The fear in the clown's eyes had been all too real, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. As the evening wore on, I tried to distract myself with the mindless chatter of the television, but my nerves were on edge, every creak of the floorboards and gust of wind outside sending my heart racing. My breath caught in my throat as I turned to face the window, my pulse quickening with a sickening sense of dread. There, illuminated by the soft glow of the street lamp outside, stood the clown. Its painted face leered at me from the darkness, its eyes gleaming with an otherworldly intensity. With a gasp, I stumbled backwards, my heart pounding in my chest as a surge of primal fear coursed through my veins. This was no prank, no harmless joke. This was something far more sinister, something that defied rational explanation. Not knowing what to do, I ran to the window and pulled the curtain. The days that followed the chilling encounter with the clown were filled with an oppressive sense of dread that seemed to cling to me like a second skin. But it was in the dead of night, when the world was shrouded in darkness and the silence of the house seemed to echo with unseen whispers, that the true horror began to unfold. As I lay in bed, tossing and turning in a fitful sleep, a faint sound caught my attention, a soft, rhythmic thumping that seemed to emanate from somewhere above. With a sense of trepidation, I climbed out of bed and made my way to the attic door, my hand trembling as I reached for the pull cord that would illuminate the darkness beyond. With a hesitant tug, the light flooded the narrow staircase, casting long shadows that danced like specters in the flickering glow. As I ascended into the gloom, the air grew thick with the scent of dust and decay, the weight of centuries seeming to press down upon me with each step. And then, at last, I reached the summit, the attic, a forgotten realm of forgotten treasures and forgotten memories. But amidst the jumble of boxes and forgotten relics, something lurked, a presence that sent a shiver down my spine and set my pulse racing with a sickening sense of dread. There, in the far corner of the attic, stood the clown. Its painted face seemed to leer at me from the darkness, its eyes gleaming with an otherworldly intensity that sent a chill down my spine. For a moment, we stood locked in a silent, unspoken exchange, the weight of its gaze bearing down upon me like an invisible force. And then, with a sudden burst of movement, the clown lunged forward, its painted grin twisting into a grotesque mockery of a smile as it reached out with gnarled fingers that seemed to stretch and contort like twisted branches. With a cry of fear, I stumbled backwards, tripping over the detritus that littered the attic floor as I scrambled to escape the clutches of this unholy terror. And as I fled the attic, my heart pounding in my chest and my breath coming in ragged gasps. After my harrowing escape from the attic, I found myself cowering behind the kitchen table, my heart pounding in my chest with a mixture of fear and adrenaline. Regret gnawed at me like a festering wound as I berated myself for not calling the police when I saw him outside the window. Instead, I had pulled the curtain closed and lived in fear, hoping that the nightmare would simply disappear on its own. But there was no escaping the truth now. The clown was real, and it was coming for me. Suddenly, the silence was shattered by the sound of heavy footsteps echoing through the hallway. My breath caught in my throat as I watched in horror as the clown burst into the room, its painted face contorted into a twisted grin that sent a shiver down my spine. "Stay back," I shouted, my voice trembling with fear as I scrambled backwards, my hand groping blindly for something, anything, to defend myself. But the clown paid no heed to my pleas, its eyes gleaming with an otherworldly intensity as it stalked towards me with predatory grace. "Mom, help!" I screamed, my voice echoing off the walls as I watched in terror as the clown reached out with gnarled fingers that seemed to stretch and contort like twisted branches. And then, just as it seemed that all hope was lost, there was a sudden burst of noise, a loud clang that reverberated through the room like a gunshot. With a cry of relief, I turned to see my mom standing over me, a frying pan raised high above her head, her face a mask of determination and defiance. "Get away from my son, you monster," she yelled, her voice ringing out in a desperate cry for help as she swung the pan with all her might. The clown staggered backwards, its painted grin twisting into a grotesque mask of pain and surprise as it stumbled and fell to the ground with a resounding thud. With a cry of triumph, my mom reached out and grabbed my hand, pulling me to my feet as we fled out of the house, our hearts pounding in our chests as we left the nightmare behind us. As we waited for the police to arrive, we clung to each other on the curb, the echoes of the confrontation still ringing in our ears. But amidst the chaos and confusion, there was a sense of relief, a glimmer of hope that we had finally escaped the darkness that had threatened to consume us. "It's over, Roger," my mom whispered, her voice trembling with emotion as she squeezed my hand tightly. "We're safe now." And then, at last, the flashing lights of the police cars appeared on the horizon, casting long shadows that danced like specters in the darkness. With a sense of grim determination, we watched as the officers swarmed the house, their voices raised in urgent conversation as they searched for the source of the disturbance. It wasn't long before they emerged from the darkness, their faces grim and solemn as they led a familiar figure towards us in handcuffs. My heart stopped as I recognized the face of our neighbor, Mr. Jenkins, a man with whom we had shared a long-standing feud that had simmered beneath the surface for years. "What's going on, Mr. Jenkins demanded, his voice tinged with confusion and disbelief as he glared at us with undisguised hostility. "You know exactly what's going on," my mom replied, her voice cold and steely as she stared him down with a look of defiance. "You've been terrorizing us for weeks, haven't you?" Mr. Jenkins scoffed, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes as he glanced nervously at the police officers surrounding him. "I don't know what you're talking about," he muttered, but his voice wavered with uncertainty, betraying the lie. But my mom wasn't buying it. "Save it, Mr. Jenkins," she said, her voice dripping with contempt. "We know it was you. We saw you outside our window, and we know you were the one wearing that clown costume." With a resigned sigh, Mr. Jenkins hung his head, his shoulders slumping in defeat as he finally confessed to his crimes. "Fine, you caught me," he muttered, his voice barely audible over the sounds of the night. "But it was just a prank. I never meant to hurt anyone." But my mom wasn't satisfied with his excuses. "A prank?" she scoffed. "You call terrorizing us in our own home a prank?" As the officers led Mr. Jenkins away, I felt a sense of relief wash over me, a weight lifted from my shoulders as the darkness that had plagued us for so long was finally banished into the night. And as the lights of the police cars faded into the distance, I knew that we had finally escaped the nightmare that had haunted us for so long.